So next we're going to make a... Start again. So this video is about how to skillfully hold and navigate authenticity within the context of circling and facilitation. We were talking about this earlier and thought that this would be quite an important video to make, because there's some way that as circling facilitators, we're inviting people to express vulnerably and more authentically than maybe they're used to in their lives. And we're kind of modeling that in the process, and by doing so inviting others into playing the game of authenticity and openness. And there's something that's really important to be mindful of in that exploration, which is this power differential. So the analogy that comes to mind for me is like, sometimes I like to wrestle. I like to wrestle with my friends, like playfully, and we're not actually trying to hurt each other or whatever. And it's fine if we're about the same size. We can like go at it and really play. But if I have, an extra 40 pounds on someone and I'm not aware that I have an extra 40 pounds of like muscle and fat and this weight advantage, I might really hurt the person. And when I think that analogy kind of like fits for my experience of facilitating, there's some way that by people attending a circle or an event that I'm leading or a weekend that we're facilitating or something, we have a just that extra bit of edge, we're in some position of power. So if I say something and it's authentic versus someone else who's if I say something while I'm facilitating a circle and I'm being authentic in the process, that statement carries a lot more weight, gravity, and significance because of that power differential. So there is something to being honest, being authentic, being open and real with people. We're like attempting to do that and really encouraging y'all to do that as facilitators. And there's some ways to do it more gracefully or skillfully than others. Being authentic isn't a license to be an asshole. It's not a license to, enact my pain and wounding in some way that causes non-constructive harm to someone else, especially if that is someone else that I'm in the care of to some extent. I'm curious if you have any thoughts or anything you want to add.
Yeah, I think for me, there's always this dance of when I'm bringing my authenticity, like, is it relevant? Is it in service of the circle? Is it in service of connection? Or is it in service of, also could be in service of like dissonance and permissioning the room to actually bring their like less shiny and perfect and kind of people-pleasing behaviors. Mm-hmm. So I sometimes have these different filters. So like I have moments where I'm like, oh, I haven't eaten in a while and I'm suddenly super annoyed with this person. I can tell it's not about them at all. It's like, I'm hungry. I might not bring that, right? Like some petulant child part of me that's like, you're annoying, stop it, right? It's like, actually, I might say like, oh, I notice I'm feeling irritable and I'm realizing I haven't eaten, but I might not actually bring the like content that irritability was holding, because it's not relevant. It's not in service of connection. It's not in service of the group necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm often amazed at like the more skillful I've become with communicating, the more freedom I seem to have to express a lot of my inner experience. Like I have told people essentially that I don't like them before. And I remember years ago trying to communicate that to someone and it creating a lot of like non-constructive pain and like disconnection and whatever. And I've more recently expressed some similar emotional sentiment towards someone, but in a way that I owned far more deeply. I brought with like care for their experience and some degree of like introspective inquiry in the process. Like, hey, I noticed that there's something about you that I find quite activating and I want to pull away from you and I have these judgments. And I've like shared it in a way that they actually hear it more easily, and it actually brings us closer in the process. So I think part of the work around authenticity is not about telling someone I don't like them just because I want to try and hurt them in some way, but actually doing it in a way that's like of service to our relationship. And yeah, I've just been really amazed at the depth and breadth of what I can bring into connection with someone if I bring it with skill. Yeah.
One of the other things that I think has affected me profoundly is learning that, again, going back to that principle, if you've watched the video on lean into connection, this idea that if I lean in, if I bring, let's say I'm bringing something that's harder to hear, and I like lean away, it's going to create, actually, it's going to lower the person's capacity to actually hear me, because their system is suddenly activated to look, because moving away physically is a message that who they are, it can be interpreted as who I am is not good and people want to leave me or disconnect, which is very activating for the system. So feeling goes up in those moments and thinking goes down, and capacity to receive, think, and process also goes down. So in those difficult moments, if I lean in and I say, hey, I want to bring something, and I actually, again, context. Let's say I set some context. Hey, I have some challenging stuff come up for me in connection with you. And again, if this is true, and I'm really committed to being in connection with you or being in community with you, I'm not going anywhere. What I bring in service of naming something such that I can clear it from our relationship or not have it have the same emotional hold. I've found that people can hear almost anything, like, or in those moments, the opposite happens. If I'm like, oh, I'm not sure about you. Maybe you're a bad person. I'm suspicious of you. It's like, hey, I know that you're a good person at heart. I'm not going anywhere, and I have some like difficult stuff coming up that actually want to bring, because I imagine other people don't reveal this to you or whatever, and it feels important. Their capacity, it expands, right? Mm-hmm. And I've been on the receiving end of this in amazing ways that have just allowed me to hear things that I would never have been able to hear otherwise. So it can be a really, and that's the thing, when we bring that kind of authenticity and bring things that no one else would ever really know how to bring to someone, it can be one of the greatest gifts they ever get, to like actually, coming back to one of these core themes of circling, it's shining a light on people's blind spots, right? We call the octopus on the face. It's like, oh, someone's got an octopus on their face. They can't see it, but everyone else can, right? And bringing some challenge or obstacle or block that prevents you from being close or feeling close.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I would say the flip side is true also of like, if I don't want to connect with someone, maybe that's what's most real and authentic to me, is that I actually don't want to connect with them. That's just as welcome also. And I think for me, I kind of have some like internal rule I'm realizing right now as I talk about this around like, don't bring something into connection with someone unless I'm actually willing to be with the impact and kind of work through it to some extent. Like, hey, I don't like you and I find you really annoying. Okay, see ya. It's very different than like, hey, I find that like somehow in connection with you, I feel like annoyed. What's that like to hear? Or like, and I want to like talk about it to some extent. Like it feels like callous and cruel just to tell someone that, like without some sort of willingness to at least stay in or share my intention in communicating it. Maybe if there's a boundary, I feel like annoyed with you, I don't really want a relationship, that's okay. But I think there's a way of doing it like compassionately versus at someone
kind of offering his feedback and then running away.
Yeah, like authenticity at someone else's expense versus authenticity in service of some clear internal intention that I'm holding and maybe even communicating. It feels like one of the bigger distinctions in the practice.
Yeah, totally.